Lightning split the neon-streaked sky, its arcs painting jagged wounds across the darkness that shrouded the city. Ethan Carter stood by the foggy window of his cramped studio apartment, shoulders tense, cheeks damp with sweat, finger hesitating over the accept button on his phone. The app had come from nowhere, drifting into his email inbox with the subject line, "Exclusive opportunity, contract of a lifetime." In his desperation, laid off from his job at the data analysis firm he had served for 7 grinding years, he had skimmed the summary of immediate compensation, enough to cover rent, groceries, and perhaps even an overdue hospital bill for his father. Without pausing to examine the fine print, he tapped the screen. A single beep confirmed the transaction. The app closed with a swirl of colors, replaced by a circle of strange script that glowed on the phone's display. Outside, the storm hammered the glass, rattling it in its frame. He inhaled, exhaled, and felt a tingling sensation race from his fingertips to the crown of his head, as though he had just triggered an electric spark that ran directly into his soul. "Probably just my nerves," he mumbled. A fresh wave of anxiety made him rub the back of his neck. He tried to open the app again, curious about the details, but it had vanished from his home screen like a passing wisp of smoke. With a shrug, he set his phone on the worn table, the only furniture that remained aside from an aging couch and a half-broken dresser. The faint hum of the overhead light followed him across the room as he washed the meager dishes in the sink. Sleep refused to come easily that night, for his mind was awash with regrets. Why had he been so careless? He needed that money. He couldn't live on good intentions alone. And so, lulled by exhaustion, he sank into a dreamless slumber. Yet, the night had other plans. At precisely 3 a.m, a burst of violet light erupted in the center of Ethan's small apartment, accompanied by a high-pitched resonance that rattled the picture frames on the wall. He jolted awake, heart pounding, eyes darting toward the phenomenon unfolding near the foot of his couch. In midair, arcs of cosmic electricity coalesced, forming an oval shape lined with swirling alien runes, the same shapes he had glimpsed on his phone just hours before. Within seconds, a figure emerged, tall, lithe, and entirely otherworldly. Piercing eyes glowed beneath a ridged brow, and the figure's skin was the rich hue of amethyst, faintly luminescent in the dimly lit apartment. She stepped fully into Ethan's living room, clad in garments that appeared woven from midnight threads, the fabric shimmering with every move. A scabbard hung at her side, from which protruded the hilt of a slender blade etched in patterns that matched the swirling symbols still dancing in the air. Ethan scrambled to his feet. Thoughts flashed like lightning. Was this real? A nightmare? He blinked in rapid succession, fighting to contain his panic, then heard a soft but resonant voice speaking in fluent, if slightly archaic, English. "My name is Kaela," the warrior woman said, placing a clenched fist against her chest. "You have signed the contract. By ancient vow, I am bound as your guardian." She paused, her gaze flicking around his shabby apartment, her posture rigid with authority. Ethan opened his mouth to speak, though only a croak emerged, so he tried again. "Guardian? Contract? What is this?" Kaela inclined her head, purple skin shimmering under the flickering light. "The bargain was struck when you accepted terms from the Celestial Exchange. In your realm, perhaps, they cloak their binding pacts in digital illusions. The moment you tapped accept, you wove your fate with mine. I am bound to protect you at all costs." The powers of the cosmos recognized the covenant. Ethan's mind whirred with terror and disbelief, yet he could not ignore the raw reality of the woman standing in front of him. Before he could demand more answers, the building's fire alarm began to ring, shrieking as if the entire complex had become a war zone. Kayla's head snapped to the door, her posture instantly alert. Enemies approach. Her voice was taut, a low vibration of grim certainty. Ethan stared at her, mouth still agape. "Enemies? You mean, someone is actually coming?" Before Kaela could reply, thunder resounded outside, and the door to Ethan's unit exploded inward, revealing a group of black-clad figures armed with sleek, futuristic rifles. Their eyes were hidden behind tinted visors, and their bulletproof vests bore the emblem of one of the largest corporate conglomerates in the country, Trigon Innovations, notorious for its cutthroat acquisitions and whispered allegations of illegal research. "We have confirmation," barked one of the intruders, his voice robotic through the comm in his helmet. The subject is in the room. Detain them both. Ethan's heart pounded like a drum, but before the enforcers could take a step, Kaela drew her blade with a fluid motion. A brilliant white light emanated from the runes carved into the metal. She dashed forward, impossibly fast, slicing one of the rifles in half with a single, elegant stroke. A cascade of sparks lit the threshold, and with a second movement, she disarmed the other intruders, sending them staggering backward. "I have sworn to protect," she declared, voice resonant with cosmic power. "Stand down, or face the might of the Guardian." The corporate enforcers scrambled out into the hallway, but more footsteps pounded on the stairs, an entire squad of them. Ethan grabbed his coat, pockets still stuffed with old receipts, and followed Kaela's lead. They slid into the corridor, stepping around shattered door frames and fleeing tenants. Alarm bells clamored throughout the building, echoing off the concrete walls. Fear kept Ethan's thoughts half-formed, but Kaela's presence, somehow both comforting and terrifying, urged him onward. They reached the back exit, an old metal door that opened onto a loading dock behind the building. The rain pelted down in cruel sheets, lightning streaking overhead, while thunder battered Ethan's eardrums. Kaela spared no glance for the storm. She flung the door aside, nearly ripping it off its hinges. Beyond lay an alley, illuminated by a flickering fluorescent lamp. Just then, two black SUVs screeched around the corner, headlights blinding as they advanced through the puddle-laden asphalt. Figures poured out from the vehicles, brandishing more advanced weaponry, their barrels glowing faintly with electronic pulses. A pit formed in Ethan's stomach. He knew these men. They were Trigon Innovations' specialized retrieval team, rumored to handle the corporation's critical assets with lethal efficiency. But how did they even know he had signed this bizarre contract? Shouts echoed through the alleyway. "Surrender the Guardian, or we will open fire." Kaela stepped before Ethan, shielding him. She raised her free hand, and arcs of violet-hued energy crackled from her fingertips, swirling around them both. A single pulse leaped from her open palm, colliding with the nearest SUV and knocking it onto its side with a violent crash. Men shouted curses, sparks flew, and shards of tinted glass rained upon the slick pavement. Ethan felt his voice tremble as he called out over the thunder. "Kaela, let's get out of here." She nodded. "There is no victory in a pointless battle," she said, her tone solemn but firm. With that, she led him deeper into the labyrinth of alleys behind the building. Their pursuers followed, the metallic clank of boots on asphalt mingling with the savage roar of the storm. Flashlights pierced the gloom, painting frantic arcs of whiteness against the dripping brick walls. For an hour or more, Kaela and Ethan wove through the warren of derelict industrial zones, each route leading to yet another alley or loading dock. Gradually, the corporate enforcers' shouts grew distant. When they finally found refuge beneath a rusted awning near a locked basement door, Ethan sank to the ground, trying to catch his breath. Kaela stood guard, sword in hand, her alien eyes scanning the darkness. "Why? Why are these men after me?" Ethan asked, voice shaking. "I'm nobody, just a data clerk who got fired. Why would they care about some contract I signed on my phone?" Kaela turned to him, her expression softened. "Your realm is not as ignorant as it appears, Ethan Carter. Certain powers, hidden behind the veil of commerce, have long sought to harness celestial energies. The contract you signed grants you a portion of that power, power enough to tip the balance of entire wars, if properly manipulated. The Guardian is the second half of that contract, the living conduit meant to protect and guide the mortal who accepted it." Ethan stared, swallowing the lump in his throat. "So, I have some kind of cosmic power now?" She shook her head. "Not in the sense you might hope. The contract forges a link between us. Through me, your life force becomes connected to an ancient cosmic lineage. These men seek to exploit our bond, siphoning the energy that the Guardian bestows, twisting it to their corporate designs. In short, they wish to capture both you and me, and they will not hesitate to do so by force." Every fiber of Ethan's being quivered with dread. What do we do?" "We must flee," Kaela said simply. "Find a secure haven and learn the extent of our bond. Only then can we stand against these mercenaries and the power behind them." The storm raged on around them, but But in that small enclave of shadows, Ethan felt, for the first time, a glimmer of hope. He knew nothing about cosmic pacts or warrior guardians, but something in Kaela's bearing, perhaps her unwavering confidence, allowed him to trust her. His life had already taken a wild turn. There was no going back. It was well past midnight when they found sanctuary in a disused transportation hub under the city. The old subway station had been abandoned after a partial collapse 15 years ago, sealed off by municipal authorities, left to gather dust and cobwebs. Yet, knowledge of the city's neglected corners was second nature to Ethan. He had spent countless hours wandering as a child, searching for mysteries in the cracks between tall buildings. Though the corridors smelled of mildew and stale air, it was a haven from the corporate enforcers that still patrolled above ground, their searchlights sweeping through the midnight gloom. Together, they navigated the derelict tunnels, stepping over rusted rails and broken tiles. The flickering glow of Kaela's sword illuminated their way. The echo of dripping water accompanied each footstep, as though the station itself slumbered, waiting to reawaken. Finally, they reached a small storage room, long forgotten, containing a few broken chairs and a table dusted with cobwebs. Ethan set down a battered flashlight he had found in a caretaker's locker, and Kaela quietly closed the creaking door behind them. This was as close to safety as they would get for now. Ethan collapsed into a rickety chair, every muscle in his body screaming for rest. He gazed at Kaela, noticing details that had been blurred by adrenaline before. The subtle patterns along her brow, the luminous freckles on her cheeks, and the gentle taper of her ears. She was, in fact, beautiful in a fierce, ethereal way. The sword strapped at her side, still glowing faintly, served as a constant reminder of what she truly was, an alien warrior, sworn to protect him by some cosmic decree he barely understood. He took a shaky breath. "So, I'm guessing you didn't sign up for this, either?" Kaela's expression remained neutral, though her gaze flicked to the floor. "Not precisely. My people, the Ithish, honor ancient compacts formed centuries ago. When a mortal from a distant realm is chosen by the Celestial Exchange, one of our clan is bound to serve as guardian. I was chosen by the oracles, without my prior knowledge, and dispatched here to fulfill that role. It's my duty, and I cannot break the oath." Ethan nodded, threading his fingers together. "And if you don't do your duty?" "The consequences would be dire," she replied. "The cosmic forces do not tolerate oathbreakers. I would lose more than my life. I would lose my essence. My entire being would unravel. Yet, do not think I resent you, Ethan Carter. The path of the Guardian is honorable, so long as we remain true to our mission. But truthfully, I did not expect danger to appear so swiftly. Something sinister is at work here." Silence filled the small room, the faint drip of water echoing beyond the door. Ethan reached into his jacket pocket, found a half-eaten protein bar, and offered a piece to Kaela. She eyed it curiously, then took a tentative bite, wrinkling her nose at the taste, though she ate without complaint. Exhaustion draped over them like a heavy cloak, yet the threat above forced them to keep watch in turns. After a few hours of restless sleep, Ethan awoke to find Kaela standing at the doorway, peering into the gloom with alert eyes. She looked like a sentinel carved from amethyst, her posture regal despite the shadowy environment. "How long did I sleep?" Ethan asked, voice still groggy. "Barely 2 hours," Kaela replied. "I sensed no immediate presence of the enforcers, but we should remain cautious. My plan is to continue down the tunnels, see if they connect to a safer district above. You mentioned that your father is ill. Do you need to see him?" Ethan's heart twisted. "He's in the hospital, but it's quite far from here. Also, I can't risk drawing attention to him. Trigon wouldn't hesitate to use him as leverage if they knew he existed." Kaela nodded, her face unreadable. "Then let us hope we can solve this matter swiftly and safely. Perhaps, once the bond is fully understood, we can use its power to bargain for your father's well-being." Ethan smiled despite his fatigue. "Thank you. Let's get moving." They gathered what few supplies they had, then set out along the abandoned tracks. The deeper tunnels gave way to labyrinthine corridors, some collapsed, others brimming with stale water. Kaela took the lead, her blade shedding a luminescent glow, guiding them across precarious platforms, rust-eaten beams, and crumbling stairwells. Now and then, Ethan heard distant echoes, as though the station exhaled in its sleep. Yet, they pressed on. Hours later, just as they felt they might be trapped in the underbelly of a forgotten metropolis, they found an exit that led to an old maintenance shed near a disused train yard on the outskirts of the city. The gray dawn filtered through the rain-soaked sky, revealing twisted piles of scrap metal and abandoned carriages dotting the yard like ghostly sentinels. No black SUVs in sight, no corporate mercenaries brandishing rifles, just cold air and puddles stretching over cracked concrete. Ethan exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Kaela's sharp gaze swept the area, ensuring no immediate threat lay in wait. Satisfied, she nodded, then sheathed her sword at her hip. "You'll need new clothing," she remarked, noting Ethan's disheveled appearance. "And somewhere to rest properly. The day is just beginning, and your pursuers won't stop. Let us stay alert." They picked their way through the train yard, eventually slipping through a hole in the chain-link fence. On the adjacent street stood a run-down convenience store, the neon open sign flickering in the semi-darkness. Inside, an elderly cashier dozed behind the counter, oblivious to the world. Ethan quietly selected a few staple items, snacks, a cheap hoodie, bottled water, and placed them on the counter. Realizing he had almost no money, he flinched with embarrassment. Then, something peculiar happened. Kaela placed her hand on a small device attached to her belt. Light shimmered from her palm, and the store's security camera blinked with static interference. A subtle murmur of energy moved through the air as she tapped the cash register's keypad. The total showed $0. The elderly cashier blinked, confusion clouding his gaze, and then promptly yawned. Before Ethan could question it, Kaela guided him out the door, leaving a small bit of cash that Ethan had left in his wallet, hardly enough to cover everything. "Did you just hack that register with magic?" Ethan asked once they were back in the gray daylight. Kaela shrugged, her posture still alert. "I do not know your word for it, but the Guardian's gifts allow me to manipulate certain technologies. It is a lesser talent, one used primarily to conceal our presence when necessary. I left what currency we had, out of courtesy, but we must move quickly." Though guilt tugged at Ethan, he had never stolen anything in his life. He understood the urgency. They had bigger battles to fight than paying for a few supplies. By midday, the skies had cleared, revealing the city's towering skyline in sharp detail. Clouds moved lazily beyond the spires of glass and steel. Ethan and Kaela watched from afar, concealed within the crumbling shell of an old manufacturing warehouse. Dust motes danced through beams of sunlight, and the only sound was the lonely whistle of wind through broken windows. They spoke in hushed tones, trying to devise some semblance of a plan. Kaela explained more of her people's ancient creed, how the Guardians were part of an interstellar alliance that scoured the cosmos for sentient species. Their mission was to share knowledge, foster cooperation, and, in rare cases, offer a bond that could unlock a species' hidden potential. But somewhere in this city, a corporate behemoth had learned of the celestial exchange and angled to harness its power. "It is no coincidence," Kaela murmured, arms crossed. "They likely infiltrated the celestial exchange's networks, ensuring that one of their chosen, perhaps a high-level operative, would receive the contract. But fate intervened, and the invitation reached you instead." Ethan shook his head, trying to absorb the enormity of it all. "Me? A simple data analyst? There must be a mistake." "Fate does not err," Kaela said softly, "but it is sometimes cryptic." Ethan leaned against the rusted wall, letting out a soft laugh full of irony. "Well, I can't do anything about it now. So what are our next steps? We can't hide forever." Kaela closed her eyes for a moment, pondering. "We must learn more about Trigon innovations, about their methods and their resources. And we must be prepared for further attacks. The bond we share, though incomplete, may be enough to defend ourselves. If we strengthen it, we might even stand a chance of thwarting them. I sense that the exchange gave you an app, or at least a device that is crucial. But it disappeared, yes?" Ethan pulled out his phone, flipping through the screens and icons, finding nothing unusual. "Yeah, it's gone. No sign of it. Just that strange circle that was on my screen when I first tapped accept. Then it vanished." "Sometimes," Kaela said, "the contract's mark reveals itself only when you are threatened or when you intentionally call upon it." He frowned. "I'm not eager to see more trouble, but If that's what it takes to protect us, I'd do it. Soon after, they decided to move again. Although the warehouse was remote, it offered little in the way of security. They gathered their sparse supplies and ventured into a quieter section of the city, an old borough dotted with abandoned properties and outdated security systems. Kaela's plan was to find a place they could fortify, at least for a short while, and attempt to awaken the contract's hidden pathways. They came upon a row of condemned row houses, windows boarded, doors chained. Choosing the largest, they slipped inside through a splintered back door. The interior was musty, strewn with debris, but the walls were solid, and the basement seemed secure enough. After an hour of cleaning out loose rubble and dusty furniture, they had transformed the neglected dwelling into something close to a hideout. Ethan sprawled on an old couch they had found, the springs poking through with every shift. Kaela inspected the windows upstairs, ensuring that no watchers lurked outside. Then she returned, resting her sword against the wall within easy reach. "Take off your jacket," she instructed, nodding toward Ethan. "Sit. Close your eyes. We will attempt to harness the contract." A memory stirred in Ethan, from a childhood dream of wizards and spells. He shook off his self-consciousness, shrugged out of his coat, and settled on the couch. Kaela placed her palm against his forehead, her skin cool but electrified with faint energy. "Focus on your breath," she whispered, "and recall the moment you signed the contract. Visualize it in your mind, every detail, every flicker of light, every sensation in your body." Ethan tried, though the memory was fraught with fear. He remembered the swirl of colors, the glyphs etched across his phone. Suddenly, he felt a jolt, as though invisible threads were knitting themselves into his consciousness. Colors pulsed behind his closed lids, reds, violets, silvers. Something akin to the hum of cosmic wind filled his ears. Kaela's voice vibrated through the haze. "The bond is forging. Let it guide you." A burning warmth spread through Ethan's chest, not painful but exhilarating, reminiscent of adrenaline without the terror. He sensed Kaela's presence, immense and ancient, mingling with his own mind. He thought he saw glimpses of a star field, a swirl of galaxies, and then a grand temple carved from stone older than memory. He stood at the threshold of that temple, a single step away, but hesitated. "Do not fear," Kaela whispered. "Step forward." He did, in his mind's eye, placing one foot inside that cosmic sanctuary. A flare of light seared his vision, then faded, leaving him gasping for breath in the dim living room of the condemned house. Kaela removed her hand, a faint smile touching her lips. "The connection grows, Ethan. I can feel it. Soon, you will be able to call upon greater gifts, though I do not know precisely what form they may take in a human. You must be cautious. Power often reveals the darkness within us as much as the light." He nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. I want to stay alive, keep you safe, and maybe get my life back if that's even possible." She inclined her head. One step at a time. Outside, distant sirens wailed, and the murmur of traffic drifted by. The day progressed, filled with quiet vigilance. Kaela trained Ethan in simple defensive maneuvers, explaining that even a small measure of cosmic energy could amplify his speed and reflexes, if channeled properly. Over hours that felt like days, they practiced weaving that energy, though Ethan could only manage fleeting sparks, faint enough to vanish in an instant. Despite the challenges, a bond of trust began to form between them, a closeness that transcended their differences in species and origin. When Ethan asked about Kaela's homeworld, her eyes lit up with longing and pride, describing vast crystal forests under lilac skies, spires that touched the heavens, and swirling seas of liquid silver. She spoke of clan gatherings under the 3 moons, celebrating life, unity, and the ancient cosmic pacts that kept their people bound to justice. In turn, Ethan recounted tales of Earth's wonders, great canyons carved by time, oceans teeming with life, cultural marvels like city skylines and ancient ruins. Though fear still simmered in the background, fear of corporate agents, of unknown cosmic forces, and of the unstoppable chain reaction he had triggered, a fragile sense of hope glimmered in the silent spaces between their words. Their temporary peace ended on the 3rd night, when distant gunfire shattered the silence. Ethan and Kaela jolted awake, hearts pounding. Quickly, they checked the windows. Down the street, muzzle flashes lit the darkness. The corporate enforcers had arrived in force, apparently clearing abandoned houses in search of them. Kaela's expression hardened. "They've found our trail." Ethan swore under his breath. They had precious few choices. With Kaela's help, he could slip out the back and vanish into the night. But the enforcers seemed to be sweeping the entire block in a methodical pattern. There was no telling how many squads were out there. Before they could formulate a plan, a voice boomed through a megaphone outside. "We know you're in this area, Ethan Carter. This will only get worse if you do not surrender. The Guardian belongs to Trigon Innovations by right of contract." Ethan's eyes narrowed. By right of contract? How dare they? Kaela grabbed her sword. They lie. However, if we do not act swiftly, they will trap us. We must take the offensive. Yet, the idea of confronting a heavily armed squad made Ethan's stomach churn. Kaela's skill was fearsome, but could she face an entire battalion of advanced weapons on her own? The corporate squads might possess technology specifically designed to counter cosmic energies, especially now that they had witnessed Kaela's abilities. As they peered from a side window, they saw dark figures wearing exoskeleton suits, each soldier armed with a rifle that glowed with purple-blue arcs. Strange insignias glimmered across their armor, reminiscent of the cosmic runes that formed Kaela's sword, only twisted, corrupted. "That's stolen tech," Kaela murmured in disgust, her knuckles whitening around the hilt of her blade. "They must have taken scraps of celestial exchange code and weaponized it." A dreadful screech rang out as a squad used some sort of energy tool to cut through the door of the row house across the street. Sparks flew in all directions, casting eerie shadows on the pavement. They would be next. Ethan's pulse thundered in his ears. "If we run, they'll corner us. If we fight, we risk." Kaela put a hand on his shoulder. "We cannot remain passive. Remember your training. The bond between us is strong, though not yet complete. But perhaps it will be enough." He swallowed, nodding. A wave of determination washed over him, fueled by adrenaline and the memory of how these corporate hounds had attacked him in his own home. He refused to let them claim Kaela as some sort of prize. The plan formed swiftly. While the enforcers were busy breaching the next house, Kaela and Ethan would slip out a back window and flank them. Surprise might give them a fleeting advantage. The night sky was moonless, the perfect shroud. Quietly, they pried open the back window. Ethan glanced around, saw no immediate threat, and dropped onto the weed-choked patch of dirt behind the house. Kaela followed, landing gracefully. Together, they crept along the side of the building, guided by the faint glow of distant streetlights. The roving beams of corporate spotlights danced across the night, but for the moment, no one spotted them. They huddled behind a half-collapsed wall, waiting for the right moment. Then, a sudden crash signaled that the enforcers had finished cutting through the neighboring row house door. Voices shouted, boots stomped, and the squad poured inside. "Now," Kaela hissed. They rushed forward. Kaela lifted her palm, conjuring a swirl of violet energy that slammed into the front of the building, disorienting the mercenaries. Ethan followed with a wild leap, heart pounding, adrenaline surging. Though he had never been in a fight like this, he felt a strange electric current run through his limbs, as if Kaela's power had lent him superhuman reflexes. Bullets, no, pulses of some energy-based ammunition, flew past. Ethan ducked behind an overturned car, while Kaela engaged 3 heavily armored soldiers at once. Her blade cut through the air, each swing releasing arcs of cosmic power that rebounded off the soldiers' exosuits. Sparks ignited. The men shouted in confusion as their stolen technology malfunctioned under Kaela's direct assault. Ethan, crouched behind the car, realized another soldier was taking aim from the building's broken window. Without thinking, he stretched out his hand and focused on the swirling energy within him, the same he had touched during their training. In a sudden burst, a thin lance of light erupted from his outstretched palm, striking the soldier's weapon. The gun exploded in a shower of sparks, sending the soldier reeling back. Ethan gasped, unable to believe what he had just done. A wave of fatigue threatened to overwhelm him, but he fought it, clinging to the adrenaline. Nearby, Kaela danced among the exosuit soldiers, her sword a blur of silver and violet, each strike precise. A short cry rose above the tumult. One of the mercenaries had circled around and tackled Ethan to the ground. jamming the barrel of a pistol under his chin. The corporate insignia glinted in the faint light, the soldier's mask reflecting Ethan's terrified face. "Stay down." The soldier's voice trembled with aggression, his finger on the trigger. Time seemed to slow. Kaela was engaged with 2 more soldiers. She could not reach Ethan in time. The soldier's breath came ragged through the mask, but the gun remained steady. In that split second, Ethan felt something within him ignite, a surge of that cosmic bond. He planted a hand against the soldier's chest plate, sending a jolt of purple-silver sparks coursing through the man's armor. The soldier convulsed, eyes rolling back, then collapsed. Gasping, Ethan pushed him aside and scrambled to his feet. Kaela dispatched the last foe with a deft strike. Silence descended, broken only by the sizzling remains of corrupted exosuits and the ragged breath of the unconscious men. 2 had managed to flee into the night, presumably to regroup. Ethan rubbed his aching shoulder. We actually did it." Kaela gave him a measured look. "You tapped into the contract's gifts more strongly this time. I sense its presence in you, more pronounced. That was risky, but we had no choice." Adrenaline slowly receded, replaced by trembling limbs and a swirl of conflicting emotions. They had survived another confrontation, though it was clear that the net around them continued to tighten. Trigon would escalate their tactics, sending more dangerous squads until Ethan and Kaela were captured or destroyed. "We need to find a safe place," Ethan said, voice shaking from the aftermath. "Somewhere truly hidden." Kaela nodded, scanning the dark streets. "Agreed. But we need more than just safety. We need allies, or a strategy that can uproot Trigon's power. If they truly have harnessed cosmic technology, they could menace even my own people." Suddenly, Ethan recalled a friend of his, an old college roommate named Ray Marshall, who worked in the city's underbelly of black market electronics and privacy tools. Ray's alliances were murky, but they had a moral code. They hated the unscrupulous corporate giants that preyed on the vulnerable. If anyone could help them disappear or find crucial intel, it would be Ray. Ethan explained his idea, and Kaela agreed without hesitation. They had little choice but to risk trusting someone. Together, they vanished into the gloom, leaving the battered mercenaries behind. On the horizon, dawn began to break, pale light creeping over the battered street like the promise of a new day. Faded graffiti lined the cracked walls of the alley leading to Ray's workshop, hidden beneath an abandoned parking garage on the outskirts of the financial district. The sound of dripping water echoed in the gloom, mixing with the hiss of steam from the labyrinth of pipes overhead. Ethan approached a battered steel door, half concealed behind a pile of junk. He knocked in a distinct pattern, 2 quick taps, a pause, then 3 taps. Moments later, a mechanical click signaled that someone was watching from inside. A rectangular slot slid open. A pair of sharp eyes peered out. "Ethan Carter," a familiar voice rasped, tinged with caution. "I thought you were supposed to be comfortably employed at that data firm by now." "And who's your friend?" Ethan forced a grin. "Long story, Ray. Please, I need your help." A pause. Then the door swung open with a metallic groan. "Get in here, quick." He stepped inside, followed by Kaela, who kept a hand near the hilt of her sword. Ray's workshop was a cavernous space lit by a mishmash of flickering LED strips, desk lamps, and glowing hollow monitors. Tables overflowed with half-assembled drones, circuit boards, and tangled wires. The air smelled of solder and machine oil. Ray Marshall was a wiry individual with short-cropped hair, dressed in coveralls stained with grease. A half-smoked cigarette dangled from their lips, and a perpetual scowl furrowed their brow. Despite that gruff exterior, Ethan knew Ray to be fiercely loyal to friends. "So," Ray said, waving a hand at Kaela's otherworldly appearance, "somehow you got an alien bodyguard, or something. That's new." Ethan took a deep breath, giving a bare-bones summary of the contract, Kaela's arrival, and Trigon's pursuit. Ray listened without interrupting, aside from the occasional raised eyebrow. When Ethan finished, Ray tossed the cigarette into a makeshift ashtray. "I always said, stay away from suspicious apps," Ray muttered drily. Then, glancing at Kaela, they added, "No offense, warrior princess, but your people sure picked a random guy." Kaela only shrugged, her expression unchanging. Ethan cleared his throat. "We need a safe place to hide, and if possible, we need intel. Anything you can give us on Trigon's operations." They've got squads with advanced gear, some kind of cosmic tech. Ray rolled their eyes. You're lucky I owe you for that time you helped me with the infiltration software back in college. Fine. I'll see what I can do. But you need to know, you're not the only one in trouble. People have been talking about men in black gear, snatching folks off the streets. Rumor says they're looking for some big cosmic prize. Now I know they're talking about you. Ethan felt guilt twist in his stomach. I never wanted this. But I can't walk away, not now. Ray nodded, then turned to a cluttered console. They typed furiously, lines of code flashing across multiple screens. Kaela surveyed the workshop, occasionally poking at random contraptions with mild curiosity. In less than an hour, Ray had compiled a dossier. They pointed at the largest display. There's a facility in the industrial quarter, officially owned by a subsidiary of Trigon. Security is tight. Shipments come and go at odd hours. I suspect that's where they're keeping any advanced or stolen tech. If you want to get rid of these guys, or at least hamper their ability to hunt you, this might be your target. Blow the place up, or hack it, or something. Kayla's eyes narrowed. We should disrupt their operations, yes. But I'd prefer not to harm innocents. Is there a more subtle approach? Ray snorted. You could always try infiltration, download, and wipe their data. That might slow them down. Trigon invests billions in R&D. If you sabotage their progress, it'll cost them more time and resources than a direct assault. Ethan sighed, tired but resolute. All right, we'll figure out how to get in. Can you, maybe, create a ghost profile for me and Kaela? Something that keeps us off the usual surveillance grids. Sure, Ray replied. I've done it before. We'll need to use some deep-level hacking, but it'll buy you a few days before they sniff out the fabrications. Those few days might mean the difference between life and death. Ethan thanked Ray, promising to repay the favor someday if he survived. Ray only gave a wry grin in return. By late afternoon, they had new IDs, courtesy of Ray's expert hacking. Kaela disguised herself as best she could, wearing a long coat and a hood that concealed her alien features. Her luminescent skin still posed a risk, but it was the best they could do. With Ray's advice, they set out for the industrial quarter, bracing for the challenge that lay ahead. Be careful, Ray said at the door. And if Trigon goes nuclear, don't come crying to me. Ethan clapped Ray on the shoulder. We'll try not to. Night draped the industrial quarter in a shroud of darkness, broken only by scattered security lights and the glow of distant factories. Towering smokestacks stood like silent sentinels, exhaling plumes of steam. The facility Ray had identified sprawled behind a tall metal fence, topped with razor wire and monitored by surveillance drones that buzzed overhead like mechanized hornets. Ethan and Kaela crouched behind a row of cargo containers, scanning the perimeter. Armed guards stood at the gates, each equipped with gear reminiscent of the squads they had encountered before, though these carried heavier weaponry and wore full tactical masks. Massive floodlights swept the yard, creating rotating islands of harsh illumination amid the shadows. This is no small outpost, Kaela whispered, her amethyst eyes glinting with determination. We must remain unseen for as long as possible. Ethan nodded. We need to find the data center, copy or destroy their research, then slip out. Maybe we can slip in through those loading bays, if we time it right. They waited, tension coiling in their muscles, until a truck approached one of the loading docks. The gate slid open, and a group of workers in gray jumpsuits rolled out a ramp to unload large crates. With the guards momentarily focused on the truck, Ethan and Kaela darted across the yard, hugging the shadows. Kaela used her cosmic sense to disrupt a nearby drone, causing it to veer off its patrol path. Reaching the side of the building, they pressed flat against the corrugated metal walls. A single security camera loomed overhead, rotating in a slow arc. Kaela lifted her hand, and a faint shimmer of energy engulfed the camera lens, freezing its feed. Quickly, they slipped inside through a side door, which Ethan managed to jimmy open with a credit card and a bit of luck. Inside, the facility was a maze of corridors bathed in sterile fluorescent light. The hum of machinery thrummed beneath the floor, while the walls buzzed with hidden cables. Occasional footsteps echoed through the halls, forcing Ethan and Kaela to duck into dark alcoves or behind stacked crates. Each time, Kaela used a subtle wave of her hand to scramble the nearest camera feed, but Ethan knew their luck couldn't last forever. Following Ray's intel, They navigated deeper into the complex, descending 2 flights of stairs until they reached a heavily guarded door labeled Secure R&D Lab. 2 corporate soldiers stood at attention, rifles in hand, behind a reinforced security gate. A digital panel required coded access, possibly a biometric scan. Any bright ideas? Ethan muttered, peering from a corner. Kaela studied the soldiers. We can incapacitate them quickly, but the door remains a problem. Ethan exhaled slowly. We'll have to do it the old-fashioned way. Let's see if we can lure one of them away and force him to open it. Fortune smiled upon them momentarily. A phone buzzed on a guard's belt. The guard stepped aside to answer it, leaving the other soldier momentarily distracted. Taking the chance, Kaela moved like a breath of wind, her sword's hilt striking the first guard on the helmet with a crack, disabling him before he could make a sound. She extended her free hand and released a pulse of energy that short-circuited the second guard's rifle, forcing him to drop it. Then, with lightning speed, she grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the wall, her eyes gleaming with fierce intensity. "Open the door," she hissed, pressing the blade's tip to his neck. "No alarm, or you die." Trembling, the guard fumbled with the biometric pad. A beep signaled access granted. The door slid open, revealing a sterile lab beyond, lined with computer terminals and sealed glass chambers. Kaela swiftly struck the guard's temple with the hilt of her blade, rendering him unconscious. Then she and Ethan moved inside, securing the door behind them. The lab was dimly lit by the glow of multiple monitors. Racks of humming servers stood in the center, while large transparent cylinders, some containing bizarre organic shapes, lined the walls. Ethan's stomach churned at the sight. Half-formed alien tech fused with human engineering. Sparks and currents danced within those containers, like a grotesque mockery of Kaela's cosmic energy. At a central workstation, a single scientist, wearing a lab coat adorned with Trigon's emblem, tapped frantically at a hollow keyboard. They looked up in shock at the sudden intrusion. Ethan raised a hand, trying to appear non-threatening, while Kaela kept her sword at the ready. "Don't move," Ethan warned, though his voice wavered. "We're not here to kill you. Just step away from the console." Wide-eyed, the scientist complied, stepping back with their hands raised. Kaela moved to guard them, while Ethan approached the computer, plugging in a small drive Ray had provided. Lines of code scrolled across the screen, hacking into Trigon's data vault. Guilt mingled with the pounding of his heart as he realized the scale of what they were doing. This was corporate espionage, sabotage on a massive level. But if it prevented Trigon from enslaving or dissecting Kaela's people, or even Ethan himself, then so be it. The progress bar inched forward. Kaela kept a watchful eye on the door, as well as the scientist, who stared in half-horror, half-fascination at her. Finally, the screen flashed. Data upload complete. Ethan tapped a final command, unleashing a digital worm designed to corrupt the lab's research files beyond recovery. The servers hummed ominously, and the lights flickered. Outside, shouts and footsteps echoed, no doubt alerted by the door's forced entry. Ethan ejected the drive, stuffing it into his pocket. "We need to go now." The scientist bit their lip. "What have you done? Do you have any idea the breakthroughs we've made here? The power we've harnessed from beyond the stars?" Kaela regarded them coldly. "You have stolen and perverted cosmic knowledge for profit and tyranny. The Ithish do not take kindly to such acts." Suddenly, the door slid open with a hiss, revealing a group of heavily armed soldiers, each wearing advanced exosuits that glowed with runes. Their rifles snapped into position, eyes locked on Ethan and Kaela. "Hands in the air. Drop your weapon." Ethan's heart lurched. Kaela tightened her grip on her blade. The tension crackled in the air like a thunderstorm about to break. Then, a voice boomed from behind the soldiers. "Hold your fire." A tall figure stepped forward, clad in an ornate exosuit bearing the highest rank insignia. The faceplate retracted, revealing a middle-aged man with sharp features and cold eyes. He radiated authority and danger. "I am Gerald Hawthorne, Director of Trigon's Special Projects Division," he announced. "You must be Ethan Carter, the unfortunate soul who signed a contract he never read, and Kaela, the so-called Guardian." Ethan's hands balled into fists. "Unfortunately for you, we just corrupted all your precious data. You'll have to find another way to be a cosmic parasite." Hawthorne's expression darkened. "A minor setback, I assure you. You have no idea how deep our network goes. But no matter. Hand over the Guardian, or your father's life is forfeit." At those words, Ethan felt as if ice had replaced his blood. What do you mean? My father is in the hospital." A cruel smile curled Hawthorne's lips. "Indeed. Under our close watch. One order from me, and the next nurse you see will be the last person he ever meets." Ethan's vision blurred with rage. He moved to attack, but Kaela placed a restraining hand on his shoulder, her own posture rigid with fury. "You dare use an innocent life for leverage?" she spat, eyes glowing fiercely. "You defile the cosmic pacts." Hawthorne shrugged, as though bored. "All that cosmic talk means nothing to me. I only care about results. Surrender, or the old man dies. It's your choice, Mr. Carter." Tears burned in Ethan's eyes. They were cornered, outnumbered, and the father he so desperately wanted to protect was now a bargaining chip. He felt the cosmic energy surging within him, but if they fought now, his father might pay the ultimate price. "This is madness," he whispered, fists shaking. "All right, you win, Hawthorne. Just let my father go." Hawthorne's cold smile widened. "Very good." He gestured to the soldiers. "Arrest them. We'll handle the details soon enough." The soldiers moved in, rifles raised, activating glowing restraints that crackled with stolen cosmic energy. Kaela locked eyes with Ethan, silently conveying the question, "Should we fight?" But Ethan could not see a way to ensure his father's safety if they resisted. With a shaking breath, he nodded at Kaela, signaling his acquiescence. They allowed themselves to be bound. The cosmic restraints bit into their wrists like electrified serpents, neutralizing Kaela's powers and leaving Ethan drained. Hawthorne turned on his heel, commanding the soldiers to escort them to a secure transport. As they were marched away, Ethan's mind reeled. Had he doomed them all by surrendering? Did they still have any chance of escape? The only glimmer of hope was the data they had stolen. Ray might use it to find a way out. For now, though, they had to endure the wrath of Trigon innovations. The secure transport rumbled along a highway bathed in the harsh glow of streetlights. Through reinforced windows, Ethan glimpsed the cityscape rushing by. He was cuffed to a seat, flanked by armed guards whose exosuits hummed with contained energy. Across from him, Kaela was similarly restrained, her expression carved in stone, lips pressed into a grim line. Hawthorne sat at the front, quietly typing on a hollow tablet. Occasionally, he glanced back at Ethan with a smug twist to his mouth, secure in his victory. Despair weighed on Ethan like a lead blanket. He had risked everything to ensure his father's safety, only to fall into the enemy's grasp anyway. Doubts needled him. Could he have tried a daring last-minute escape? Could Kaela have overcome all those soldiers? But Hawthorne's threat against his father had left little room for defiance. The caravan of vehicles veered onto a private road, eventually arriving at a heavily fortified compound. High walls crowned with razor wires surrounded a central building, bathed in harsh floodlights. Armed patrols roamed the perimeter. The gates slid open, admitting the transport into an underground garage. With mechanical efficiency, the guards ushered Ethan and Kaela out, leading them to an elevator that plunged deeper into the facility. The corridor below was silent, sterile. A single metal door at the end of the hallway bore the label, Containment Vault. Hawthorne keyed in a code, and the door slid open with a hiss. Inside, the space felt more like a prison cell than a lab, complete with transparent panels that formed a sealed chamber. The soldiers shoved Ethan into one side, Kaela into another, each separated by a clear but unbreakable barrier. "Here we will keep you," Hawthorne said, standing just outside with a sneer. "Until you cooperate fully. We'll extract the Guardian's essence for our own use. And if you refuse, we will simply harvest it the hard way." Ethan spat at the glass. "You're insane." Hawthorne chuckled, turning on his heel. "Insanity is just another word for ambition that people don't understand. You brought this on yourself, Mr. Carter." With that, he left, the soldiers trailing behind. The locks engaged, leaving Ethan and Kaela in oppressive silence. Kaela pressed a hand against the barrier, her violet eyes troubled. "I sense powerful dampening fields in here. My abilities are hindered." Ethan pressed his own palm to the glass, opposite hers, wishing he could touch her hand. "Then we have to find another way out. Maybe Ray can track us here." Kaela lowered her gaze. "That is uncertain. We cannot rely on external help alone. The contract is incomplete, but perhaps we can attempt to merge our powers once again. Even dampened, the cosmic bond might overcome this technology. The notion sparked a tiny ember of hope. Ethan focused on his breathing, closing his eyes, recalling their earlier training. Despite the exhaustion and fear, he tried to summon the cosmic flow that connected him to Kaela. He felt a faint flicker, like static electricity dancing across his skin, but the barrier and the dampening field suppressed it. Kaela tried as well, her aura flickering softly before fading. Hours passed. The overhead lights cycled, indicating some semblance of day and night, yet they remained trapped. Guards occasionally brought food packets, tasteless rations that Ethan barely touched. His mind was a tempest of guilt, rage, and desperation. The only comfort was Kaela's presence, though they were physically separated. On the third day, if Ethan's sense of time still functioned, Hawthorne returned, accompanied by a pair of lab technicians in sterile suits. They carried ominous instruments that glowed with stolen cosmic runes. Hawthorne addressed Kaela, his tone chillingly polite. "My dear guardian, it is time we put your powers to beneficial use. Cooperate, and I'll keep my word about the father. Resist, and I'll end him." Ethan's chest seized with panic. He watched as the technicians activated a control panel, opening Kaela's cell door. Armed guards dragged her into an adjoining chamber, forcing her onto a metal platform. She shot Ethan a final, pained glance, trying to convey silent reassurance. Then the heavy doors sealed, leaving Ethan to pound helplessly on the barrier. For the next hour, flickers of strange lights pulsed behind the chamber's windows, accompanied by muffled shouts and the hum of machinery. Ethan's imagination conjured terrible visions of Kaela being tortured for her cosmic essence. He paced like a caged animal, fists slamming the transparent barrier, breath ragged with rage. When the door finally reopened, Kaela was barely able to stand, her skin a paler shade of violet, her breath shallow. The guards dragged her back to the cell, tossing her onto the floor. They sealed the barrier. Hawthorne stood outside, a triumphant sneer on his face. "You see? No lasting harm. But if you push me, Carter, I can make it far worse. Spare your father. Spare yourselves, by giving us what we want." Ethan's voice tore from him in a raw cry. "You monster! What else do you want from us?" Hawthorne's sneer deepened. "Merely your full cooperation, to harness the contract fully. We believe the Guardian's power can be maximized when the mortal partner is properly trained. You can help us refine that process, or you can watch those you love suffer." Before Ethan could respond, Hawthorne turned and left, the door clanging shut. Overcome by fear and anger, Ethan rushed to Kaela's side, though the barrier still separated them by a foot of transparent wall. She coughed, trembling, yet she managed to lift her gaze to meet his. "Do not give in to despair," she whispered, voice thick with pain. "The bond is strong." Ethan fought back tears, pressing his hand once more to the barrier. "I'm so sorry, Kaela." She exhaled, eyelids drooping. "We cannot let them break us." In that moment, something inside Ethan snapped, his fear and hopelessness twisted into a fierce, protective resolve. He closed his eyes, willing the cosmic energy to surge, to tear down the barrier between them. A faint glow shone beneath his skin, intensifying with each beat of his pounding heart. On the other side, Kaela felt it too, her own aura flaring. The overhead lights flickered, and the hum of the dampening field wavered. The cosmic bond roared like a storm in Ethan's veins, threatening to overwhelm him. Then, with an almost deafening snap, the glass barrier cracked. A spiderweb of fractures splintered across its surface before it shattered entirely. Alarm klaxons sounded. Red lights flashed as security protocols engaged. Guns automatically descended from the ceiling. But Ethan lunged forward, seizing Kaela's trembling form, propping her up with one arm. She clung to him, drawing on his energy as the cosmic bond blazed. A hail of gunfire erupted from the automated turrets, but a shimmering violet field surrounded them, deflecting the bullets in a brilliant display of sparks. With grim determination, Ethan and Kaela strode through the hallway, shielded by their combined power. The door ahead slammed shut, but Ethan extended a hand. A beam of light lanced from his palm, melting the lock in seconds. Alarms blared louder. Guards swarmed the corridor, But Kaela, revitalized by Ethan's presence, unleashed a wave of cosmic force. The men were flung aside like leaves in a gale, weapons clattering uselessly across the floor. Step by step, the pair advanced, unstoppable. Fear burned in Ethan's gut, yet an unyielding purpose carried him forward. He had to reach Hawthorne, ensure his father's safety, and free them both from this nightmare. Ahead, the hallway opened into a command center bristling with monitors and control stations. Hawthorne stood at the far end, flanked by more soldiers. The man's face twisted with disbelief at the sight of them walking unscathed through gunfire. Then, anger replaced disbelief, and he barked an order. Fire. Use the disruptor cannons. A massive turret rose from the floor, crackling with energy that matched Kaela's cosmic aura. It fired a pulse that collided with their protective shield. Kaela gasped, nearly falling to her knees, the force overwhelming her. Ethan grit his teeth, focusing all his will to strengthen the barrier. Another blast rocked the corridor, sending shockwaves of pain through their bond. Through the haze, Ethan spotted a control console behind the soldiers, a single large switch labeled Quantum Disruptor Override. If they could reach it, perhaps they could shut down that infernal cannon. He nodded at Kaela, who returned a pained, determined look. They dashed to the side, weaving between columns as another disruptor blast streaked past, scorching the walls. Soldiers fired guns, but the cosmic field deflected most of the rounds, though the strain was evident on both Ethan and Kaela. In a desperate bid, Ethan fired a bolt of energy at the cannon's power conduit, causing sparks to erupt. The device hissed and sputtered, momentarily disabled. Seizing the opening, Kaela lashed out with a wave of force that sent the soldiers reeling. Ethan sprinted to the override switch, slamming his fist against it. The entire command center flickered, the monitors blinking out as the disruptor's power supply shut down. Hawthorne, eyes wild, raised a sleek pistol at Ethan. You fool, don't you realize what you're meddling with? Ethan stared down the barrel, sweat dripping from his brow. I realize you've hurt too many people. Let my father go. Hawthorne laughed, a shrill, desperate sound. You think I won't shoot? I've come too far. But Kaela was already there. She swung her sword in a precise arc, knocking the pistol from Hawthorne's hand and slicing a deep gouge through his exosuit. Sparks flew. He stumbled back, pressing a hand to the exposed circuitry. Curse you both, he spat, fury burning in his eyes. Ethan turned to a console, searching frantically for any sign of communications regarding his father. Kaela pinned Hawthorne with a fierce glare, blade hovering near his throat. Tell us where Ethan's father is, she demanded, voice trembling with righteous anger. Hawthorne glared, but seeing the unwavering determination in her gaze, he relented. The hospital, you know. Room 427. A man named Vogel is overseeing him. If I don't send the code, Vogel will. Kaela's blade pressed closer to his throat. You will send the code now. Gritting his teeth, Hawthorne tapped a command sequence into a wrist device, presumably halting any threat to Ethan's father. Meanwhile, the facility lay in chaos, alarms still blaring, but the immediate security had been disabled or disarmed. Ethan used the console to locate evidence of Hawthorne's involvement in cosmic trafficking, enough to place him at the center of a web of illicit operations. He downloaded it onto a spare drive. Perhaps, if they made it public, Trigon would be forced to back down. With a final, disgusted look at Hawthorne, Kaela stepped back, sword still raised. Ethan sent out a system-wide broadcast, ordering all personnel to stand down under Hawthorne's command code. Screens flickered with the override. Stunned guards lowered their weapons. Hawthorne tried to flee, but Kaela's cosmic surge pinned him to the floor, rendering him unconscious. She could have ended his life then, but Guardian honor forbids such an act against a defeated foe. Panting, Ethan gazed at Kaela, a trembling smile on his lips. We did it. Let's get out of here and rescue my father. She nodded, leaning on him for support. The cosmic bond still pulsed in their veins, fierce and bright, yet it was tempered with relief. At last, they had broken free from the lion's den. Days later, the storm of confrontation had passed, though its effects rippled throughout the city. Leaked documents, courtesy of Ray's hacking skills and the data Ethan extracted, had exposed Trigon Innovations' black operations, prompting global outcry and government investigations. Hawthorne was officially arrested, though rumors suggested he might try to flee or buy his way out. Ethan's father, freed from the corporate noose, recovered steadily in the hospital. Ethan visited him often, though Kaela kept a low profile, wary of the many eyes that watched them now. Media stories swirled about an alien warrior, sightings confirmed by scattered eyewitness accounts. Some labeled Kaela a threat, others hailed her as a savior. The truth lay somewhere in between. On a warm evening, Ethan and Kaela stood atop a secluded rooftop, gazing at the city lights twinkling below. The air felt lighter, as though the cosmic tension that had once suffused their every breath had lessened. "I am grateful," Kaela said softly, turning her amethyst gaze on Ethan. "I never expected a mortal to risk so much for me. But you did." Ethan smiled, though his voice carried a hint of sadness. "We're in this together. I don't know what happens now. Will your people call you back?" Kaela sighed, stepping closer. "They may. The Ithish will wish to know all that has transpired. But the bond we share is not so easily severed. Until this contract is fulfilled, or until we both agree to part, I remain your guardian. And if I say I'd like you to stay?" Ethan ventured, a note of earnestness in his tone. "There's still so much to do. Trigon might rise again in some other form. And who knows what else lurks out there." She lifted her chin, thoughtful. "Then I shall stay, as your protector and your friend. Together, we can safeguard both our worlds, should fate demand it." A gentle breeze ruffled Ethan's hair, and he allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. His life had been forever changed. He had seen wonders and horrors that he never imagined. Yet, Kaela's presence reminded him that new paths, new possibilities, lay open. In forging this strange cosmic bond, he had discovered both the best and worst of humanity, and chosen to stand for what was right. As the stars began to glitter above, Ethan reached for Kaela's hand. She intertwined her fingers with his. The contract's mark, faintly visible as a spiral of runes on their wrists, pulsed with quiet radiance. In that shining instant, they felt not only the weight of their trials, but the exhilarating promise of what lay ahead. They stood together, no longer bound by fear, but by choice, hope, and a friendship born of desperation, yet tempered by loyalty. The city's neon lights glowed against the dark sky, a testament to the resilience of life, and the cosmos looked on, a vast tapestry of infinite possibilities. In that moment, for once, peace seemed entirely within reach. And, as they turned to watch a new dawn break over the horizon, neither Ethan nor Kaela could suppress the warm rush of optimism that, against all odds, they had found their way to a happy ending, together.